Edward Gibbon wrote the 6-part series The Fall and Decline of the Roman Empire. In Book 1, he discusses the rise of Christianity and the things he believes led to its rise. This is Part 3 of this series. The third reason that Gibbons wrote about was the miraculous powers ascribed to the primitive church. In this secular age, the talk of miracles seems to be one of faith. Many believe this all to be made up, and others believe the miracles of Jesus and his disciples were real, and did in fact happen. The disciples and others were witnesses to Jesus' resurrection. To me, the biggest reason for believing the miracles of Jesus happened were the disciples' actions after Jesus died. So he dies, the disciples think they are going to be killed next, they are afraid and hiding for their lives. Jesus then comes to them, back to life, and is with them for 40 days before going up into heaven. If you are someone who believes none of this happened, it just seems so hard to believe that the disciples and early Christians, who are said to be witnesses to miracles, would continue to preach and spread the word of Jesus. If Jesus was a false prophet, all of his disciples after his death would have seen that Jesus was just that, a false prophet, and continue on being Jewish. Why continue Jesus' ministry if he was a fraud? Why get stoned to death? Why get crucified? For a man who never performed miracles, who was a fraud? To me, you just wouldn't do that. Had Jesus not fulfilled his word and not performed miracles, Peter would have gone back to being a fisherman. But he didn't. None of the disciples did. To me, the disciples and early Christians' actions after Jesus died is proof that the miracles really did happen. There is also an interesting part of miracles and the Catholic Church in modern times that I wanted to make the subject of this post. The Vatican has a miracle commissions which investigates miracles, and their standards are very strict. Almost all of the miracles are medical miracles that are investigated. There is a group of doctors, scientists, and people in the church who work on this together. There needs to be an almost 0% chance you would live. If a doctor says you have a 10% chance to live, then the miracle is easily dismissed by critics, so it's dismissed by the miracle commissions as well. There are places such as France's Sanctuary of Our Lady of Lourdes where there have been 70 confirmed miracles by the church over the decades. You can see a 60-minute interview with Sister Bernadette Morio, who had a diagnosis of full total paralysis and is able to move and walk around. One of the more recent miracles was that of Melissa Villalobos. She was pregnant and experiencing complications where she was constantly bleeding and had a high chance of dying. There was nothing that the doctors could do but order her on bed rest. This excerpt is from a Catholic News Agency article/podcast in which Melissa spoke about what happened. On the morning of May 15, 2013, less than a week after being diagnosed with the condition, Villalobos woke up in a pool of her own blood. Villalobos had lost so much blood that she collapsed on the floor. Unfortunately, though, somehow, I did not have my cell phone with me, she recalled. I couldn't believe it. She considered shouting for one of her kids to bring her phone, but worried that the shouting would cause more bleeding or a miscarriage. Desperate, she called out to her old friend, Cardinal Newman. I said, "Please, Cardinal Newman, make the bleeding stop." And just then, immediately it stopped. And I stood up, and I smelled roses that filled the bathroom air. The smell of roses is often considered the scent of holiness, with many stories of saints leaving a rosy scent in places where they have intervened in prayer. And I said, "Oh, Cardinal Newman, did you just make the bleeding stop? Thank you." And then there was this second burst of roses. And I knew I was cured, and I knew Gemma, my daughter, was okay, Villalobos said. Villalobos had an ultrasound scheduled for that afternoon, and the doctor found what Villalobos attributes to Cardinal Newman's intercession. The bleeding had completely stopped. The doctor saw that there was no more bleeding, and he was amazed, and he said, "The baby looks perfect." It was vastly different than Villalobos' previous experience in the pregnancy. The doctors had said, "You will probably miscarry if you're lucky. The placenta could barely hold up to the third trimester, and she'll be born, but she'll be really small, and she'll have medical problems," Villalobos recalled. "Thanks be to Cardinal Newman and to God that I was cured and Gemma was born completely healthy." Whether you believe in current-day miracles or not, that is up to you. But it seems that early Christians who were around Jesus and the disciples did, and with that the faith and community grew.